experts, no aliens, no nonsense. This is Reality Bytes.
Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 20th of April 2015. Delighted to have a guest with us, Dr. Rebecca Carley. Going to be discussing vaccines and many issues surrounding that topic. We've done it before with other doctors, but so what? It's worth revisiting over and over again until we get this stopped, I guess. Dr. Carley, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. I normally start with guests I've never spoken to before, just to get them to introduce themselves and basically the background and explain how they got to where they are, kind of thing, with whatever issue it is they're interested in. With yourself, it's vaccines. So if you want to introduce yourself and give us a bit of history.
Sure. I'm a medical doctor. I was trained as a surgeon. I left working in the hospital in the early 90s after witnessing euthanasia, research fraud, and experimentation on people. But I did not know about vaccines until my only son became brain damaged from vaccines. He's a little over 19 years old now, and that's how I went down this rabbit hole. I learned how to reverse vaccine damage with homeopathy, and I have a protocol now that I use for people and pets all over the world to teach them how to reverse their vaccine-induced diseases, which covers pretty much all diseases in internal medicine. Of course, it's not just vaccines. We're being poisoned in so many ways: pesticides, fluoride, aspartame, chemtrails. The list is endless. So what I do is take an individual history from people, determine what the major toxins are they've been exposed to, and then develop an individual protocol for them to reverse the damage with natural therapies as well as detoxify with homeopathy. So I've been doing this almost 2 decades, and this has put a target on my back by the medical mafia big time.
Well, as it does with many doctors who speak out, I guess, in particular, I suppose Andrew Wakefield's the one that's most highlighted. I mean, you actually had a conference, I don't know if you knew, at the weekend in Texas on autism. We've been in touch with him before, and when I lived in Ireland, we had Dr. Wakefield over, and he did some talks and stuff, and I didn't unfortunately get to talk to him on the radio because he was too busy answering questions for people. But anyway,
if I can just ask you a question, is he talking about the virus causing the autism? Because I met him over a decade ago at a talk in Canada, and I told him that autism is actually subacute sclerosing panencephalitis due to the measles virus. Last I heard, he was still highlighting the mercury, which has nothing to do with autism. It's the measles virus that's causing the autism. So is he talking about viruses now?
I'm not entirely sure. I just knew you had a conference at the weekend. I just mentioned it. No, I was going to come on to that actually, because I just read your article today. The recent Fed court decision in autism case proves Dr. Carley right, and I wanted to go through that with you because, as you say, you've pointed out here that it's not the mercury; it's actually the viruses, live viruses that are in these vaccines, and many vaccines
right,
that are causing this kind of damage. So, do you want to start with that?
Sure. And actually, that's on my reversing vaccine-induced INDUCED diseases.com site on the vaccine-induced disease tab. There is a case, a young girl by the name of Hannah Poling, and she went through the vaccine court, and they determined that her autism was due to vaccines, and it was a very interesting decision because in the decision they actually mentioned how she got chickenpox from the chickenpox vaccine. So that's one of the things I try to make people realize when they tell you that they're vaccinating you against a virus, they're actually inoculating you with a virus. And all of these vaccines can cause the very disease that they're supposedly preventing. As a matter of fact, there was an article published on greenmedinfo.com, a very important article published on January 27th, 2015, discussing how the government researchers have actually confirmed that the measles vaccine causes transmission of measles. As a matter of fact, they call it secondary transmission. And so when we hear about these cases at Disneyland and places like that, of course, they're using this to blame the unvaccinated for the measles outbreaks, but in fact, it's actually the vaccines that are causing the outbreaks themselves.
Well, there's many articles and documentation, even from the people who make the vaccines, actually admitting that the actual vaccines cause the epidemics, as they like to report them, and that even after getting the vaccine, the so-called vaccine, you're actually contagious. So, I mean, it's as you say, the disease has been spread through the vaccines.
Yeah, the vaccine fraud is the biggest lie in medicine, in my opinion. And, like I said, I did not know this myself. My son got all his vaccines as a young child. He became brain damaged, and this is what forced me to confront reality. As I said, the good news is you can reverse the damage with homeopathy, and that's what I teach people how to do. But my goal is to stop this insanity. And, of course, the governments, various governments, I don't know what's going on in the UK, but here in the States they're trying to clamp down. They want to take away vaccine exemptions and all kinds of things. They're even talking about criminalizing parents who don't vaccinate. Because, see, as I said, this causes all diseases in internal medicine. This is how Big Pharma creates disease. And then, of course, they manufacture these toxic drugs which cure nothing, cause multiple side effects, but this is how they make billions and billions of dollars. So, I always tell people, don't believe anything I say, check it out for yourself. There are natural solutions for everything. But the main thing you have to do, and it's a very hard thing for me to say, because, when I got into medical school, that was my dream my whole life. I thought this was like the most wonderful thing. And then when I actually saw what was going on, especially in the hospitals, that's why I had to leave, because I have a conscience. I would not be part of it. And unfortunately, through standards of practice and other ways, especially licensure, that they, force doctors to do what they're told, most doctors will not stand up and do the right thing. They'll just go along with the program, and you can't trust them.
Well, absolutely not. I've never been to a doctor for, I don't know, the best part of 15 years now, for anything, and I've never been ill. Because I take my vitamins and try and look after myself. I've never even had a cold,
Right.
But in terms of the vaccine companies, Klein, Merck, whoever, anybody would be stupid to think that any private business wants to get rid of its customers. The logical conclusion is that Big Pharma has to create customers, and they can only do that by making people sick.
Exactly. And in my paper, Inoculations, a True Weapons of Mass Destruction, which is on my drcarley.com site, drcarley.com, I describe the very many ways that vaccines cause disease. They corrupt the immune system. As I said, the viruses cause the very disease they're supposed to prevent, but there's so many toxins in vaccines. And this is, like I said, the biggest lie that's ever been told as far as medicine's concerned. When I was in medical school, we didn't learn anything about the side effects of vaccines. It's just indoctrinated into doctors that this is the best thing since sliced bread, and this is what people should do to, quote-unquote, prevent disease. A bigger lie has never been told. As I said, there's natural solutions for everything. And, of course, eating good food, which is harder and harder all the time with all the GMOs, drinking clean water, breathing clean air, which, of course, is very difficult with all the chemtrails. It's impossible to stay away from all these poisons, but you do the best you can.
Well, absolutely. That's all you can do. I mean, people say, don't go to the supermarket, don't do this, don't do that. But it's all a matter of cost at the end of the day. And if that's all you can afford, that's all you can do. But, you have to pick and choose what you eat, I suppose, even in the supermarket. In terms of I lost my train of thought there. But, you mentioned the sliced bread. I never thought sliced bread was that great anyway. But in terms of the toxins, etc., in the vaccines, of course, one of the main ones is squalene, of course, which, I mean, the common sense thing to look at there, I guess, is if they stick it in your arm and it's not supposed to be there, your body starts attacking it, and then that's how you get your autoimmune response, and it continues in attacking all your joints, and that's how you get arthritis. Would I be correct in saying that?
Well, it's not just squalene. Any vaccine can cause an autoimmune response. As a matter of fact, I have a book published by NATO called Immunological Adjuvants and Vaccines, published in the early 1980s. And in that book, they actually admit that it's the aluminum in vaccines that causes what's called an IgE response. IgE is the antibody of allergy, and they have known this for decades. And so even if it's not squalene in the vaccines, even if it's aluminum that they're using as an adjuvant, it can still cause an autoimmune response.
Yeah, I just meant squalene in terms of being actually present in your body anyway, and that.
Right. Well, that's the problem with squalene, is that it's very similar to a structure that makes up your cells. And as a matter of fact, this was tested on soldiers in the Iraq War, and so many of those soldiers became ill. As a matter of fact, more soldiers are dying from their vaccines than are even dying from gunfire. But this is where they test a lot of the toxic poisons that they give to the public. They start with the military, and then, once the kill rate and the disease creation rate is shown to be very high, then they use it on the rest of the public as well.
Yeah, well, in terms of anybody thinking of joining the military, they've got to realise that they actually sign their body over totally and give up all their rights and allow themselves to be experimented on. That's just the way it is, and that's why they're called privates, because they end up being private property, I guess, of the military.
There's a very important document, if people haven't read it, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. You can just put that into any search engine. It's all over the Internet. Read what they say about the military in that document, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. And, of course, unfortunately, especially after the fraud called 9/11, which, of course, was an inside job, many young men and women joined the military believing they were serving their country. Well, the joke's on them, although it's not funny, of course. And just as you said, Neil, what they're not told by their recruiters is that once you sign in, you're agreeing to take any drug they want to pop in your mouth, any vaccine they want to shoot into your arm. You're agreeing to be an experimental guinea pig. And, if people would stop joining the military, maybe we could stop these wars.
Well, absolutely. As I've said it many times, no weapons, no wars, which means soldiers. No soldiers, no wars either. In terms of the military, I mean, you only have to look at Henry Kissinger. I mean, he called them dumb, stupid animals to be used in foreign policy. So what do you do with dumb, stupid animals? Whatever you like, I guess.
Right. Well, talk about a man that should be charged with crimes against humanity. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, George Bush, all of them, they should be hung for treason. But unfortunately, the mainstream media keeps people brainwashed, and so many people keep waving their flags. And although I'm happy to report, and as I'm sure you know, people are waking up in huge numbers. I don't know how much of a critical mass it's going to take to stop these psychopaths from what they're doing, but we're getting there.
Yeah, I believe so, and as you say, it's only a critical mass that needs to come to realise they've been lied to all their lives for things to change for the better, I guess, and get rid of some of these lunatics. But you mentioned Rumsfeld, of course. He was involved in the in Cell. Was it Cell he was in? When you talked about I think it was swine flu vaccine. He was famous for offloading onto the public by creating a fake swine flu. And
another thing he was highly involved in was unleashing aspartame on the public. There's a very important documentary that you can watch free on.
I think we've lost Rebecca, have we? Okay, want to try and call her back? Okay, we stopped at Donald Rumsfeld and aspartame.
Yes.
Carry on from there.
Yes. There's a documentary, Sweet Misery. Everybody should watch that. It explains how aspartame got approved and all the problems that aspartame causes. It's a very dangerous biological weapon. And, as I said, it's not just vaccines. There's so many things we're being poisoned with. But interestingly, aspartame is also put in vaccines. So one might ask themselves, what do you care if your vaccine is sweet or not? And this is just further proof that they're poisoning us. They put as many toxins in vaccines as they possibly can. And, they're always talking about our genetics. It's not genetics that's the problem. Although I will say that vaccines also corrupt our genetics. But, the one thing that you do inherit from your parents is the strength of your immune system. That's your constitution. And in homeopathy, we talk about a principle called a miasm. A miasm is your tendency to be poisoned by whatever. And, of course, if they would leave their poisons out of us, we would be fine. So it's not our genetics that's the problem. It's the fact that they're poisoning us and actually changing our DNA structure.
Funny you say that. We were talking about this yesterday, myself and Paula, about how many vaccines children actually get now compared to what we had. And we're both the same age, 51. And we are, relatively healthy, I would say. Compared to some of the young people you see these days. And we've gone from, I don't know how many I got when I was young, maybe a dozen or so, back in Scotland. And now I think it's up to 60 children are getting. So what's happened in between there that children now need apparently 60 vaccines when they only needed 12 before? It's just, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, even in that context.
Well, actually, I have so many documents and interviews and things. My library is huge. I'm trying to get my vaccine book done. It's over 1,000 pages. I have to edit it because it's just too much information. I have so much proof of what they're doing. But various minions have actually said that the only thing needed to approve a vaccine and add it to the schedule is the fact that it was created. So, there's no rhyme or reason for it. A company will make a new vaccine and they'll just add it to the schedule. And it's just a big experiment to see what it's going to do. There's basically three groups, at least here in the States. The Amish, children of chiropractors, and Seventh-day Adventists. Those are the main three groups that do not vaccinate. And try to find a healthy child outside that group. I mean, it's almost impossible. And that's why when I was in school, I'm 60, we had one school nurse that, traveled the county. Now you have multiple school nurses in every school because the children need to get all their meds. One of the main things that skyrocketed especially since they brought out the chickenpox vaccine, is insulin-dependent diabetes. And so, these children have to have their medications. They have to be monitored. Another thing I want to mention is the life-threatening nut allergies. As it turns out, they've been putting peanut oil in vaccines since the 60s. And this is how they're creating these situations where a child can be sitting in a cafeteria and just breathe somebody's peanut butter sandwich and go into shock. Imagine living like that. And this is all being done on purpose.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't remember anybody having peanut allergies when I was young. Nobody. And now you hear about it all the time. And just lately there was another, I can't remember which vaccine it was. I think it was actually the new flu vaccine, this year's flu vaccine, which contained dog DNA. So I reckon we're going to have a load of dog allergies coming up.
Right. And as long as you're bringing up dogs, I just want to also mention on my reversingvaccineinduceddiseases.com site, I have a pet page. And two very important things on that page. One is an article called Science of Vaccine Damage. I found that about 5 years ago. It has 19 scientific references from non-pharma funded veterinarians, which basically validate what I've been saying for 2 decades, that vaccines cause all diseases in internal medicine, not just in people, but in pets as well. The other thing I want to mention is for all you meat eaters out there, they're vaccinating the meat. They're vaccinating the chickens. There's another very important website, Merial, MERIAL.ca. That's a vaccine manufacturer in Canada for food source vaccines. For example, they're giving live herpes virus to turkeys. So, and I always tell people, if you like chicken wings, that's where they're vaccinating the chickens. So you're eating vaccines, you're getting them injected into you. They're even spraying them on us in aerosols. So this is a biological weapon.
Well, absolutely, and I think it was going back to Rumsfeld again before we get cut off. He mentioned right after 9/11 that they could spray Prozac and other things in the air, and I think he was talking about viruses as well to calm people down, apparently.
Well, there's so many ways they're altering our consciousness. There's frequency weapons. There's all kinds of things that they're using. Another very important website is stopthecrime.net. Stopthecrime.net, that's an individual by the name of Deborah Tavares. You can get on her email list. She's got all kinds of research into patents that they've, filed for things like Morgellons, which basically wires you on a nanotechnology level to alter your consciousness. There's frequencies that they can, aim at you to either get you all hyped up or to calm you down. It's absolute mind control.
Yeah. I mean, getting back to the vaccines, are there nanoparticles in them now? Do you know of that? Any of that?
Yes.
For what purpose? Again, is it to use with, we'll call it in a broad spectrum, technotronic technology?
Well, it's a method of mind control. They're putting Morgellons into vaccinations. And if people don't know about Morgellons, we don't have a lot of time to focus on that. But basically, that's something people should check into. And the CDC, as far as I know, still denies it exists. If people claim they have Morgellons, they're told they have a psychiatric problem. But interestingly, the artist by the name of Joni Mitchell was recently admitted to the hospital, and she's talking about how she has Morgellons. So people are coming forward and talking about this. And it's one of the worst things that you can possibly come down with. You get these fibers extruding from your skin. You start to itch. It's like you want to scratch your skin off. It's a terrible thing. And this was created in a laboratory as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know that because it never existed before. It just appeared out of thin air kind of thing. In terms of vaccines, again, sticking with vaccines, I mean, most of these are, I mean, apart from children, the one group you hear of primarily is pregnant women. Now, I've looked at so many vaccine inserts which tell you openly that these vaccines have never been tested on pregnant women, and they actually don't know if it causes fetal harm. Now, I mean, anybody taking that is a fool.
Well, it's very interesting. I went to medical school in the early 80s, and I saved all my notes, all my books, all my transcripts. We were actually taught that you never vaccinate a pregnant woman and you never vaccinate a child under 6 months of age. So I would love to know how did they, transform that information into now where they're vaccinating pregnant women, because, of course, you're actually not just vaccinating the pregnant woman, you're vaccinating the fetus. So you're starting the assault before the child is even born. And the rate of miscarriages, especially from the flu vaccine, is off the charts. So this is another technique of population reduction.
Yeah, and obviously it causes sterility as well in many cases. But in terms of the fetus, even I was speaking to Christine England, she was telling us of many cases where premature children are put on the vaccine schedule as if they weren't premature. So they're getting the vaccines even earlier.
Right, and when you think about the insanity of that, children are surviving from like 28 weeks of gestation. So, the normal pregnancy is 40 weeks of gestation. So that child is not even supposed to be born for another couple of months. And they vaccinate them as soon as they're born, just like all of the other children. So it's just amazing, the assault that they're encountering. And this is why, the younger the child, the more likely they are to die. As a matter of fact, all cases of sudden infant death syndrome and most cases of shaken baby are actually from vaccinations. So, once again, it's population reduction, and it's also just absolute trauma to the parents. And like you said, the vaccine insert itself says it's never been tested on pregnant women. As a matter of fact, another thing people can check out is any vaccine insert. No vaccine has ever been tested to see if it causes cancer. This is admitted in the package insert for every vaccine. And that's because they know they cause cancer. And, of course, cancer is one of the biggest money makers for Big Pharma.
Well, of course, I'll put doctor in inverted commas, Dr. Hillman at Merck admitted they put cancer in the polio virus. Polio vaccine.
Right. And then he laughed about the fact that the Russians in the Olympics would be so weighed down with tumors that they wouldn't be able to, win medals. This is how sick these psychopaths are.
Yes, absolutely. In terms of, we always talk about how do you wake people up and stuff, but in terms of vaccination, because it is so inbred into people's psyche that this is what they've got to do, they're kind of this state of fear that their child might get measles and die. And I mean, measles doesn't really kill that many people, relatively speaking. The child basically has to be ill in the first place to die of measles, more or less, along with many of the other so-called childhood diseases, which again, are these real diseases in the first place? They just label them childhood diseases. But I didn't know that many people that got ill when I was young. And we actually had measles parties. If somebody got measles, you went around and got it.
Right. I'm from a very poor family. Thankfully, my parents couldn't afford to take me to the White Coats. And I got measles, chicken pox, mumps. I got it all. And basically, when you contract one of these diseases naturally, that's how your immune system learns how to work. As I said, when they inject you with the virus, they're inoculating you with the disease. And so it doesn't give you immunity at all. It may produce antibody responses, but that is not the same as immunity. And one of the things I teach my clients about is something called colloidal silver. Colloidal silver kills every bug that's ever been tested, including HIV. And, of course, this is something that Big Pharma is trying to take off the market. They've actually labeled it a pesticide. I've been taking it for over 15 years. I have 2 dogs and 2 cats. They take it every day. It kills everything. So you don't have to be afraid of these viruses. There's things you can do. Colloidal silver has no side effects. They try to scare people. You know, they had this blue man making the rounds on television, telling people that he took massive doses of colloidal silver and it turned him blue. Something called Argyria. Well, this is another fraud. If you take the proper type of colloidal silver, you will not have a problem. I've never had a problem. It will heal burns and wounds and everything you can imagine. I've been, like I said, using it for many, many years, and I actually researched it when I started using it. Turns out it was in the physician's desk reference until the early 80s, and then they took it out because, of course, the antibiotics, the antivirals, the antifungals, this is a very big way that Big Pharma makes cash. And now we're hearing about all these superbugs. And, you know, this is the answer to the superbug problem because colloidal silver does not cause the creation of superbugs. So once again, you know, we're lied to about everything, and there's natural solutions for all of these things, very inexpensive, and that's why people have to check things out for themselves. Stop going to these white coats. You can't trust them. They're not going to tell you the truth because if they do, they'll lose their license. That's how they're controlled. And, you know, you're much better off finding a naturopath or a homeopath, somebody that practices Ayurvedic medicine, whatever. There's many natural types of healing that you can use that will actually work.
Well, I mean, I mentioned earlier I've never even had a cold for, I don't know, up to 15 years or so, or any illness really. I mean, is there, you know, if you just kind of stop taking big pharma drugs, which I've never taken anyway, most of my life, I'd barely take an aspirin if somebody offered it to me. I mean, do you actually cleanse it out your system naturally just by kind of stopping using any of it and trying to just be as healthy as possible?
Well, as I said, eating good food, drinking clean water, breathing good air, these are critical. In my opinion, everybody should detox. I use homeopathy to do that because we've been exposed to so many poisons. You know, pesticides, fluoride, vaccines, aspartame, the list is endless. So the more toxins you can get out of you, the more your body's going to be able to function. But eating good food and drinking clean water are critical.
Yeah, well, I try to. In terms of reversing vaccine-induced illnesses, diseases, some of the more common diseases, how would you go about kind of reversing the damage done by the vaccines?
Well, as I said, it's pretty much every disease in internal medicine. Insulin-dependent diabetes, juvenile arthritis, renal failure, all of the neurological conditions, not just autism, but Tourette's syndrome, even schizophrenia. The only thing that determines what your symptoms are is where the damage occurs. And where the damage occurs depends on your genetic structure, the miasm thing that I had mentioned earlier. So that's why I haven't written a book on how to reverse these things, because everybody has to be dealt with on an individual basis. because we've all had different assaults. Many assaults are the same, but it also depends on, what disease has manifested itself. One of the biggest problems with insulin-dependent diabetes is that the insulin itself actually acts as a vaccine, and you start developing antibodies against insulin. And this is another way that they keep, patients for life, because once you have antibodies against insulin, you have to constantly increase the dose of insulin. And this causes a negative feedback on the pancreas, and the same thing occurs with hypothyroidism. Once your body gets a message that you're getting hormones from the outside, that organ will just pretty much shut off. So, it's more complicated than just take this or take that. It depends on what the situation is. And as I said, the same thing is true for pets. Pets are getting all these things. I've had pets with insulin-dependent diabetes, cancer, seizures especially. As a matter of fact, seizures is one of the things that's admitted on the vaccine information statements. Of course, they totally underplay the incidence, but seizures is a very common reason that pets and people are coming down with seizures. The only two reasons for seizures are head trauma and vaccines. So, this is massive. And of course, I always tell people, you must check out the side effects of any drug that your white coat prescribes. You will be amazed at the side effects listed. For example, all anti-seizure meds, one of the side effects is seizures. Pretty much every drug actually causes the very problem that it's supposed to, treat you for. So this is what happens. You're put on a drug, you end up with all these side effects. They never admit that the drug caused the side effects. They just add another drug to the mix. I've had clients on as many as 25 drugs at one time.
It's funny here. I'm actually based in Florida. I'm not in the UK. But in the UK, I've never seen vaccines put to school. I've never seen the ads on TV in the UK giving all the listed side effects. I mean, over here, I've seen some of the ads here. I read one out a few weeks ago on an anti-smoking, a drug to stop you smoking, and they list all the things that could happen if you take this drug, and it basically goes through every major illness you can get, including suicidal thoughts and death. And the worst thing you can do is take it. You're as well carrying on smoking. The drug does you more harm than the cigarettes will do you. But in the schools here, my partner Paula's son brought home a test sheet that he'd got from the school. He's 15, so he's at that age, meeting girls and all that kind of thing. And it was on vaccines. And it was like a cartoon strip. There was 3 or 4 pages of it. And he was to do a report on it kind of thing. And the title of it was Vaccines Work. It's a Fact. So, I mean, they're getting it at that age, where they're just getting sexually active. So they're after their children, even when the children are still at school themselves.
Right. Well, of course, in my opinion, parents should be homeschooling their children.
Have we lost you again? Hello? Paula? Okay, sorry about that, cut off again. We finished on the topic of education and the fact that they're now going after people's children in school, trying to convince them that vaccination is a good thing and actually stating it's a fact when actually in fact it's never been proven to be a fact. As far as I'm aware, vaccination is still a theory. Yeah, they're going after people's children, and you rightly said that we should be homeschooling. But in terms of, Paul is going to do something about that once he's done his little test and handed it in and been marked on it with all the appropriate answers that they want. But after that, she's going to either go to the school or certainly call them up and try and do something about that. I think it's something all parents need to be doing. But of course, most parents still be under the misguided belief that vaccines are the good thing to do.
Right, until they see the results. And this is true in every area. As I said, I witnessed euthanasia in the hospitals in the early 1990s, and I do a lot of talks. And when I first started talking about this, I would get looks from people like, "You've got to be kidding me." Well, now everything's totally changed because people are witnessing this every day. They're killing the elderly, and they do it in hospitals and hospices to get them off the Medicare dole, etc. So until you see it yourself, that's when you're forced to do your research. And that's why I tell people, do your research now. Don't believe me. Check things out for yourself. There's so much information out there. And, you must protect your children. Why did you have children if you're not willing to protect them? And, of course, one of the most dangerous vaccines they've ever come up with is this HPV vaccine. And they're, not only trying to force this on the young girls, but now the young boys as well. And once again, if you check out the package insert for that vaccine, be it Gardasil or Cervarix, you will see that it has never been tested to see if it causes cancer either. So, that's what people have to start, asking their white coats. That is, if you decide to continue with your white coat. As I said, if I was you, I would be going to a naturopath, homeopath, some natural healer. Get away from these doctors because they will not do the right thing. They can't.
Well, in terms of the HPV vaccine, I was on a radio station in Ireland. They had a doctor on there who'd driven up the wrong side of the major highway in Dublin, drunk out his skull. And he's supposedly a medical doctor, and he was a member of Parliament as well there. And he went on about the HPV vaccine, saying I was dangerous, talking about this on the radio kind of thing. And he, I've lost my train of thought now. He was talking about it. He said, I said, how many are there? How many viruses are there? And he said, I don't know, about 40 or 50. So he didn't even know there were over 100. And then I started asking about scarlet fever. He said, I don't know anything about scarlet fever. I said, well, you don't know anything about anything, do you? And that was called dangerous. But anyway, my point was that in terms of the HPV, it's always struck me when they first came out with this that they were going to give it to 11, 12, 13-year-old girls. And the first thing that struck me was a brand new drug. Well, where's the test group to prove that it doesn't, it prevents cancer? There wasn't one because it was a new drug. You'd have to have, a group that were in 40 to 50-year-old women to know it worked in the first place.
Right. Well, the package insert admits it's never been tested to see if it causes cancer because they know it causes cancer. And this is another virus that I'm convinced was created in a laboratory in the first place. There was no such thing when I was in medical school. So all of these viruses, this is one of the things that they do. They find viruses, they weaponize them, and as a matter of fact, there's actually an oral rabies vaccine that they've created that can be aerosolized and sprayed on us. And this will cause rabies without you being bitten. So, I mean, the atrocities that are going on are just never ending. It's very scary, but you have to know what's going on if you have any hope of protecting yourself.
Yeah, I think they actually did spray that rabies virus or vaccine virus, call it what you will. It was either in Texas or Florida, I think. But that alone, for anybody rational, should think, well, hold on a minute, I didn't consent to that. I'm being sprayed with something I never agreed to take in the first place.
Right. Well, it's just like putting fluoride in the water. There's an excellent DVD that people can obtain called The Fluoride Deception by Christopher Bytes. It talks about fluoride, which actually It doesn't protect your teeth. It actually causes tooth decay. It causes osteosarcoma in boys. It is a mind control drug. Fluoride is also in Prozac. And as you mentioned before, in terms of what's in the water, all of these drugs that are being taken by people and are going into sewage treatment plants, there's no way to take these drugs out. So we're being constantly exposed to all of these drugs. That's why I suggest to people you have to get yourself a good water filter. And not just for your drinking water, for your shower and bath water as well. Because you absorb more of these drugs in your shower than you even do by drinking. So there's so many ways they're getting us.
Yeah, and if you talk about reducing populations, of course, John Holdren mentioned in his book Ecoscience that they should put chemicals in the water to sterilise people and to, kill them. And of course, I think it was Bertrand Russell or Huxley, I can't remember, who talked about injunctions and injections were the way to do it. And here we are.
Well, these people are psychopaths. And one of our biggest problems, Neil, in my opinion, is that people of conscience cannot even conceive of such evil going on. And that's a big problem, because if you just don't want to believe it, if you think, if you stick your head in the sand and you just go along with the program, they won't bother you. Well, you're insane, because they are killing us off. They're killing us slowly. And although it is stepping up all the time. So we have to face the fact that the world is controlled by psychopaths.
And they all wear business suits.
Exactly.
They don't wear uniforms anymore. That's just dictators over there somewhere. The new uniform of the psychopath and totalitarian scumbag, I guess, is the business suit. And we know where the problem lies. As you say, it's just getting enough people convinced, or even to look at the information, for them to see the rationale behind what you're saying, what we're all saying. It's not rocket science.
And these people are always glorified in the mainstream media. Bill Gates is a perfect example. This alleged philanthropist, who obviously they went after him for monopoly with Microsoft, and the next thing you know, he's forming his, philanthropist organization and sending vaccines to third world countries. This is one way they're dumping the oral polio vaccine, which was taken off the market here in the States because, and it says this right in the package, or right in the vaccine information statement that you can get off the CDC website, that they took the oral polio vaccine off the market because it was the only way people were getting polio. So they have all this vaccine. They're not going to throw it in the garbage. Instead, they're sending it to third world countries. And there was actually 45,000 children paralyzed in India from this oral polio vaccine that Bill Gates sent to India. Christina England does a lot of excellent articles, and she did an article on this. And thankfully, some of these countries that don't have psychopaths necessarily running them are actually starting to bring lawsuits against this monster for the damage he's caused. But, what's up with that? And there's also a TED Talk where he talks about vaccines as a way to depopulate, so...
Well, anybody who wants to know Bill Gates' background only has to look at his father, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood along with Margaret Sanger, who was a good friend of Adolf Hitler. I mean, that's all you need to know. On one hand, he wants to save black babies in Africa by giving them all these vaccinations, and on the other hand, he's promoting abortion through Planned Parenthood and killing mainly black children. So you can't have it always, can you?
The reason they're sending so many vaccines to Africa is because the more people they can kill off in Africa, the more they can steal their natural resources. Africa, has diamonds and gold and all kinds of amazing natural resources that these psychopaths want to steal. So in order to make that easier, they're killing off the people.
Well, absolutely. I mean, they say Africa's a poor country, but it's immensely wealthy if they're allowed to develop it. And even the UN had to admit, I read a report, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, that Africa could feed the world and possibly half it again, on its own. So why are the Africans starving? Well, obviously it's deliberate. Obviously. To any rational thinking person. If you got enough food to feed the world, you can feed yourself, surely. But of course, the IMF and the World Bank get them into massive debt that the only food they grow to eat, they have to export it. Again, through multinational corporations, of which Bill Gates is a big player.
Right, and that brings up the Ebola virus. As a matter of fact, the CDC owns a patent on the Ebola virus, and it's quite obvious to me that the Ebola virus was brought into Africa for depopulation purposes, but it's not just the Ebola virus. I mean, they're spraying these people with Clorox. There's so many things that they're doing to make them sick. And so we don't hear too much about Ebola anymore. I guess, that scam kind of fell away. It's not working. But there's no question that was all intentional.
Yeah, I mean, even recently, you mentioned spraying. Even recently, I think it was the Mail in the UK, and I think a number of other newspapers, for want of a better word, reported the fact that Roundup was carcinogenic. And yet, and all I'm seeing now are adverts for Roundup all over the place to try and convince people it's not.
Right. Well, it's actually quite funny. Monsanto employees don't even eat their own GMO food in their cafeteria. And it's very obvious as time goes on that this Roundup, which is being used on these GMO crops, just like with everything else, the plants become resistant. And so you need to spray them with more and more and more. And it's a toxic poison, just like all pesticides and herbicides. And so, once again, these things are never studied. As a matter of fact, I was amazed to find one of the thousands of articles I have in my library that the EPA actually has a statement where they say that companies that make all these toxic poisons, they don't have to prove that they're good. Instead, they're allowed to be unleashed on the population, and then the population has to prove they're bad. So there's no, actual testing that goes on.
Well, in terms of Monsanto, of course, they were a biological and chemical weapons company before they were getting involved in growing your food, and nothing's changed there. They're still a biological and chemical weapons company, along with most of the big pharma companies, of course, as well. They were all in that line of work as well, prior to being white coats, as you call them.
Right.
So, anybody, again, it's getting people to look at the evidence, because the evidence is there for anybody to see it. It's just that, I don't know what it is. I mean, through the vaccines or whatever, through the chemtrailing, whatever, people have been just so dumbed down and become so apathetic to everything that they can't bother checking. And that's
and they're also afraid, Fear is a very important weapon that's being used against the populations as well. Many people that I talk to, they don't want to know. They just don't want to know because it's so obvious what's going on. If I'm in the mood when I go to my local grocery store, if there's a particular heavy chemtrailing day, when I'm out in the parking lot, I'll get in a conversation with somebody and I'll say, what are those funny white lines in the sky? People won't even look up. They're afraid to look up because they know that if they face one thing, then there's going to be other things they have to face as well, and they just don't want to. Because a lot of the people work for these companies, and it's amazing how many people have sold their soul for cash. Their excuse is, well, I got to put food on the table, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, what kind of
You're
foods?
willing to kill your fellow man to feed your family. Well, the joke's on you because your family's being killed as well by other means because, as we've discussed, there's so many ways they're poisoning us.
Yeah, the food on the table for a start. I mean, we're just going to finish off here, I guess, after an hour. My two brothers were in the Air Force in the UK, and I've done the same thing. You say, what do you think of that? So, did you ever see that when you were in the Air Force? And they go, oh, no, didn't see that, ever. And I say, when you go through what it is, and they go, nah, the newspapers would tell us about it.
Right.
And that's guys who've been up in planes and jumped out of planes and helicopters and all sorts of things. They think they'd be a bit more clued up as to what comes out the back of an airplane.
Well, I'm sure they know. But once again, they can't admit it because there will be consequences. When you start talking about these things, there are consequences. And what I tell people is you're already dead. Okay, so lose your fear, face reality, do whatever you can. I mean, not many people are going to do what we do and talk on internet radio and things of that nature. But anything you can do to wake up your family, your friends, your community, whatever. If you do nothing, then you're part of the problem because silence is consent.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to something you said earlier, people won't actually do anything until something actually happens to them personally. And I think that's very true. And they start looking at things. But okay, well, thanks for your time, and very, very sorry about the cut-offs. But possibly I'll be back on again sometime in the future.
No problem. Anytime you want, Neil. Thank you for your important work.
Thank you very much. And for yours, of course. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, that's Dr. Rebecca Carley. Our website is, one of our websites, reversingvaccineinduceddiseases.com. Long title there. I'll put it in the chat box. With the article we started off with, actually, on the court case, which Dr. Carley says is, I can't even get the chat box up. Oh, there we are. Got it now. Try that. There we are. I think we'll call it a day at that, and we'll be back tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. That's 10:30 in the UK and Ireland, with Tom Secker and Pierce Redmond discussing the CIA and Hollywood. Thanks for listening.